Live from Willowdale, it's Meet Your Neighbor. Welcome, one and all, to NeighborLink North York's weekly interview series. Every Monday, we introduce you to a new neighbor in the spirit of building a more connected community. And we ask them all the tough questions, like, how do we fight climate change in Willowdale? Well, this week, on our 10th episode, we are thrilled to be joined by a Willowdaler, who is beloved by students, parents, and neighbors alike, Miss Esther Collier. We're so happy. Esther is a retired grade 8 and science and technology teacher who worked at Cummer Valley Middle School for over 20 years. She's a long-term member of the Environmental Sustainability Community Advisory Council for the TDSB. Concern for the climate caused her to initiate community engagement initiatives in Willowdale, and that has led to a Target Climate Willowdale management team. They're doing such awesome work. I can't wait to hear more. And before we dive into the interview, allow me to introduce you to your host, Lily Chang.
Thank you, Sebastian, and hello, good evening, Willowdalers. So glad to be here on this sweltering Monday night. Hopefully you are keeping cool. I just want to do a shout out to the Willowdale BIA. I know a lot of work went into advocating for Cafe TO, and though there are critics out there, I appreciate that there are picnic tables on Yonge Street that I can sit at to enjoy wonderful Hong Kong milk tea gelato that I had today from Keku Gelato. So if you have a chance, please do go out and enjoy some of our local restaurants. I know some of them are still struggling to pick up after, this long pandemic, and having some outdoor dining space is definitely helpful. Now, without further ado, I am so grateful for today's guest. She also weathered the sweltering heat on Saturday for our battery recycling event. It was called Bread and Batteries, and we set up at Earl Hague. We had, I would say, hundreds of people come with electronics to be recycled, batteries, as well as food bank donations. It was a hot day, but we were very encouraged by the positive response from the community. And we are so grateful to Ms. Esther Collier for sitting through the heat to engage our community in something very close to her heart. Let's give her a warm welcome. Hello, Esther.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. I drove a lot today. I was up in Tobermory this morning, so
right.
I was just crossing my fingers that the car wouldn't break down and made it back in time.
Well, I'm glad that you could make it in time. And, one of the ways I think that can help us with climate change is to engage with the environment. So even going to Tobermory, because sometimes, even now living in the city, we forget about nature. We forget about everything that isn't man-made. So, how does connecting with nature kind of help you in terms of your larger goals towards climate change?
Absolutely. There's a lot of there's ideas about if students really understood and connected with nature, then they would probably have a deeper recognition of our need for it, and we would preserve it more. My parents would probably tell you that I played a lot with bugs and things when I was little, but I had a very unique childhood in that I was raised in a indigenous community on a Filipino island. Yeah, I know I did not include this in my bio, so I know it's a shock, but we lived completely in a jungle community and surrounded by nature. And I definitely think trees and life were a huge part of my initial beginning and introduction to the world. And so I see them as very, very important. And as a scientist, though, you also begin to understand how we need nature, so that when I see a plant growing, I realize what it's doing and how it's changing the soil, and it's adding to the air, and how it's developing and cooling the earth by consuming energy and absorbing it and turning it into carbon storage in the branches and leaves. So all of these things are things you begin to understand when you look at things as a scientist. And so therefore you want to preserve it more as you recognize what it's doing for you. And I think many of us don't understand how incredibly we're linked to the biosphere on the earth.
Wow, that is inspiring. And I think, it's probably something that a lot of Willowdale gardeners don't think about that, this whole season of planting seeds and growing plants, it's actually adding oxygen and improving the soil beneath us. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you've tried planting here in Willowdale, but the soil is pretty bad.
Yes,
It's like
yes,
clay, right?
yes, yeah.
But we can change it, can't we?
And that, we catch all these leaves and we get rid of them, and yet they have nutrients that the soil would need. So for me, a forest is such an incredible, the best place to be. And the manicured lawns are so empty of life. And one of the first things that I did when I came to Cummer Valley is ask that a part of the field be set aside as a naturalized area. And what we do is we take the grade 6 students out then when they're learning about biodiversity, and we have them stand on the lawn, and you can't hear life, you can't find life. And then they step into the naturalized area and they are so excited because every leaf you pick up has something living under it. There are spiders weaving webs, and there are crickets jumping everywhere, and you hear the birds in the trees. It's all a complex system there, just because we've allowed those leaves to stay on the soil and turn into that rich organic matter that we need when we want to grow things. And so yeah, 100%. Like we need to stop thinking we're going to use a chemical fertilizer and put it in, and just recognize that we took out the good stuff, so just let it come back. So
Mhm.
yeah, people are learning. Like we have no mow May now in where I live, where you just let your grass grow until after May before you cut it for the first time. And people are putting more natural areas into their gardens and letting sort of wildness grow underneath the plants.
Yeah,
So,
so I am part of that club in a way. I have not mowed a lawn all year. My whole front yard is a vegetable slash perennial garden.
lovely.
And I, aspire to inspire my neighbors. So one neighbor to one side has started planting some tomatoes in her front yard, and
Lovely.
hopefully it'll catch on because
Yeah.
I'm like, who does anything on their front lawn? No one has a picnic. No one's doing somersaults, and there's so much work. It's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Really glad that we're shifting away from these manicured lawns. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
So you have, you don't look it, but you taught for 20 years at Cummer Valley Middle School, and you have probably witnessed tremendous change in our community. I was wondering if you could speak to some of the things that you have seen positive or challenging unfold before you over the last 2 decades.
Well, certainly it's growing. It's growing. I have to teach geography, which has sustainability and has human population, and so we know that our cities are just growing as the population grows and people are moving into cities. A lot of our the way we gain our income is now coming from human interactions instead of resource interactions. So we're moving together to do that. So it's growing up, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's better to grow up than to grow out, environmentally speaking. Although it was really interesting when I was learning about the climate crisis that cement is one of the big problems in producing greenhouse gases, releasing a lot of carbon dioxide, and that these high cement buildings can't last more than 100 years, so they're going to have to be torn down and made again. And so they're actually saying the mid-rise level is the best level to build, but I'm learning all of this myself. So I've seen that kind of change. I would say that Cummer Valley grounds, just seeing changes there, is that when I came, there was a lot of lawn, but we have a tree nursery at Cummer Valley where we're growing trees that we hope to give away to community members, but also the naturalized area, and 17 plus trees are planted since I came to Cummer Valley, which are now shading the west side of the school and cooling the classrooms. So yeah, those kind of changes. There's been some demographic changes as well, but nothing too big since I've been there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And do you think that, the density, does it create stress for people? Whereas, once upon a time, people had more space. So even now, like I'm looking at some of the newer condos that are being built, and like a 2-bedroom apartment can be built in 600 square feet. So, with that reduced space, do you find like there's an impact and not just space, but just the amount of people? Would that affect, how kids relate to each other, how they relate to the community?
I think definitely mental health will probably be challenged. I'm very much an international person though, and I don't think we have a right necessarily to say we're going to keep our space here and you guys can all go live somewhere else. The point is the population is growing everywhere, and we're on a planet. So I think too often we try to make it best for ourselves, but it costs somebody somewhere outside down the road. And if we don't recognize that there are desperate people in other corners of the world, I'm really passionate about Yemen. Actually, we don't ever hear about in the news, but we had 20 million people with a famine issues for 6 years. And so, we can't just protect our area. We have to live in the world and recognize that what we do here affects everybody else. So even though I don't like it, like my ideal world would have a lot less population, and it's hard to talk about population control. But as I say to kids, the population is going to be controlled. Like either we are going to control it by wise choices about how we, reproduce, or we're going to be controlling it with famine or disease or war or conflict, right? Because everyone's going to be fighting over the resources that are left. And I personally prefer the first option than any of the latter three. So, this is where I think, okay, I'm going to live in a city. It's going to get denser right now until we globally control population. And it's one thing for us to say, but many of what we own and use and are coming from other countries. And we're asking them to make it cheaper and for less and then to send it to us. And we want them to live crowded and tiny lives and use very little energy. And we want to have a bigger house and a wider yard and lots more green space. And it just doesn't balance, right? So I'm willing to sacrifice for the density, for the justice globally, and to recognize that we need to then look at mental health. What does it take to get people outside, talking to each other, keeping some green spaces because we need those. Let's plan our neighborhoods wisely, and let's teach each other and look at the big picture rather than, to make sure we get the whole picture for the future. Yeah.
I love that. And that was one of the motivations behind our Meet Your Neighbor week. Is just because I do find, especially I moved into Willowdale into a 1-bedroom condo, and all the doors were closed on my floor. So I really never knew any of my neighbors while living there. And I was quite lonely. It wasn't until I became a mom that I had a reason to, reach out and connect to more people. So we started this Meet Your Neighbor initiative, just trying to inspire. Because I think we do need to be intentional. And you're right, the design of spaces is so important towards fostering that connectivity. So hopefully, in the years to come, I know we're transforming young, but even just, how we create positive spaces for people to feel like they want to linger, like the piazzas in Italy kind of thing, right?
The pandemic's done something interesting because of the patios. So people are out on the streets more. We're bumping into each other more than when you're closed away in a restaurant. So maybe we can carry that on.
I've definitely chatted with more neighbors than I ever have throughout the pandemic. And for me, having a vegetable garden in my front yard made a huge difference because I was in my front yard all the time working, and then people would come by and they'd be curious. And so, that part of because I think Willowdale at one point has been more of a suburb, kind of like on the brink of between urban and suburb. And so the suburbs is where a lot of people just drive into their garages, and then they never meet their neighbors. So, having a reason to be outside, and the pandemic has given us that reason to be outside and locally right here in our neighborhood. I really admire your passion for, galvanizing young people to not just care about something important, but to feel like they are empowered to make a difference. I see that in the work that you've been doing, and I see it in meeting the kids that you've impacted. What was the seed that started the momentum that got you, because for many years, this was not on our radar. I think 20 years ago it wasn't. So, but this has become a real, now in your retired life, it's something you want to continue doing. So what was that first spark and seed that kind of laid the ground for where you've gone in the last, few years?
Being in science has meant that there's always been a link to it. My husband and my son are in science as well. And I think 2018, when the IPCC report came out talking about that 2 degrees wasn't going to cut it, that we had to keep to 1.5 degrees, and that we had to do it by, in 12 years, we had to cut it by 45%. And just realizing like the impossibility of that task, apparently. And then going to Thanksgiving dinner with my family that of October, and not even hearing anybody talking about it. It was just such a discord in my brain, is to have, to know how incredibly serious this was. Like, the scientists were talking about the collapse of ecosystems, the collapse of life on the planet, potentially by like 2100. And then I'm sitting here eating Thanksgiving dinner. It's like, la, 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 nothing's wrong. I'm not going to change anything about my life. And so that disconnect meant that I called my family and said, like, can we meet again? And this time, can we talk about what we're going to do about the climate crisis? And bringing my family together to talk about it, you realize that a whole bunch of them were thinking about it in the backs of their heads too, but nobody was wanting to bring it up. But the other side of being a science person is also seeing all the solutions. And it's really frustrating to see this enormous problem and to have all the answers, but not to be able to get it to happen. And so seeing both of those things, like, plans began to come together for that. And I actually went to a Transform TO event. Transform TO is Toronto's climate action strategy. And so seeing what Toronto was doing, they had just declared a climate emergency. And then to have them say in bold letters with red type, our big problem is community mobilization, connecting communities on the issue. And so that became like, okay, that's what I'm going to work at there. What is the way forward to do that? And I saw it as a 3-part problem. I think we have to have leaders that are calling people to do stuff. Like, imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and Justin Trudeau and Councillor Fillion and the mayor were all saying to you, guys, there's a serious climate crisis. This is, life-changing. And here we have all the scientists telling us we have to make, incredible lifestyle changes. So you are going to have to change your life. We know that you need to do it. We already have resources lined up to help you. We have this information to help you, but you must attend a climate event once a year. Twice is preferable. These events will be held in your local schools, but you need to get to one twice a year so you can find out how you can help and what's the next step for you, because you're going to have to change your lifestyle. Like, if that happened, we'd all get on board. This has happened with the pandemic when leaders told us what to do. We all put on masks. We all separated to distance. So our leaders need to call us to action, and they're not talking about it as though it's really an emergency. So the second part is we need to get information to people, because when I talk to people, they say, I didn't know it was so bad. And their second question is, I don't know what I can do to help. So they're not getting the information. And that's where schools play a big role, because they have this ability to disseminate information to communities more than just putting it in radio. And we have to use all the techniques, but connecting through schools. And I'll come back to the value of using schools. So I really wanted to link schools as well, but we have to also bring people together. The third thing is to bring people together into a space so that they can see each other and talk to each other, because you have answers to the questions I have, and I have answers to questions you have. And why are we both struggling alone? So when we work together, and when I did it in Richmond Hill first, a few trial events, it was incredible. The community that developed. Stressed people felt so much more empowered and hopeful when they were brought together into a group. We are a little bit like sheep, when we stand alone, we feel terrified and we can't do anything. But when we're in the crowd, we're like happy as a lark. So bringing people into a crowd and saying, hey, we're all doing this together. Let's help each other out. We're going to get it done. So now schools, you start, first of all, the kids are going to be the ones living through this life more than we are. So they need to know about it, but it's not their problem. We've created the problem. So what we're doing is we're not asking them to do things. Too often we go to students and we say, you need to walk, you need to, recycle, do this. Instead, we bring them to host so that they are learning the skills they need for when they grow up, but they're also watching the adults around them work. And they're seeing that they have a place and they can do something. And it so improves their mental health. So this is a big thing for me, is to get kids involved in the process, but also to get them seeing the adults around them working on the problem. So they're not feeling like it's all on them to fix a problem that they didn't make. So that's like putting it together is just watching it happen. Like my kids have like blown me away with how they can do things when we let them and we step out of their way. And they had their passion. They made their presentations. They led the adults around them. They got them together. They told them what to do. It was beautiful to see them bringing the community together in our live events and our virtual events that we've held since 2019 and in 2021 at the Target Climate Initiatives at the schools. So, and we're holding another one in Earl Hague, probably in November, hopefully November 18. This is the date we've tentatively set. So we want people to come and to network. We're going to bring the city in so that they can tell you what resources they have. And Earl Hague students will now be hosting it and leading it. So yeah, really want it to happen in schools.
I hope you're proud of the work that you've done. I know, there's still so much more left to do, but I think you've planted tremendous seeds, and I see the passion and the motivation, and I see that, I think, like, I like to call it like the community snowball effect, right? Like,
yes.
We want it to snowball, and it doesn't become a giant snowball overnight, but as it rolls and collects interest and momentum, it will continue to grow.
And that's, it's interesting because I don't think pride is the big thing in my head. What I feel is like, we're just starting, and the snowball is such a perfect thing because my plan is that Willowdale starts it. And I want Willowdale's going to be the star because it's going to be the model. But then the other wards are looking at us and they're going to start it in their things. And we already have, for our kids, a parent organization involved in trying to get it initiated in other wards. We have the Fridays for the Future group that is where the youth are working on pulling it together as well. So like lots of people are coming on board. Environmental Education of Ontario is really looking at what's happening too. So we're pulling this together, but it's going to get to all the wards in Toronto. And then Toronto is going to become a model for other cities in the world. So I just feel like we're just beginning. But
that's great. And we can, hopefully build a sustainable prototype that can be multiplied, scaled, so to speak.
Yes.
I think, when I think about young people, and I met, your student, William, who now works with us, a couple years ago. Actually, it was almost 3 years ago now. And that time he was just graduating from grade 8. And he said, I don't want to raise my kids in 50-degree summers. And we've seen this year that has happened already in Canada. There's been a 50-degree summer. So I think as a parent of younger children, sometimes I wonder, what is that balance of, in a way, you want us to be alarmed, right? Because it is alarming. We are in a crisis. But at the same time, you don't want children to be overwhelmed and feel helpless or hopeless. So how do you, inform children of this tremendous challenge and just a very complex world right now? I think our hearts are all very heavy right now, watching what's happening in Afghanistan and Haiti, and hearing about all these bodies of children found at all these residential school sites. I think our hearts are heavy, and we're all just wondering, we want our children to be empowered and informed, but we don't want them to be overwhelmed. How do we, and this is me as a mom asking, how do I walk with my children through this difficult time?
I think that we don't need to inform them, because they're going to pick it up. Like, we can't, the worst thing we can do is not talk about it, not like pretending that it's not there and that everything's fine, it's all going to be great, is not chiming. It's just like with me when I had that discord in my head. So they hear climate emergency, they see it, and then we don't ever talk about it. That's terrifying to them. And I had a trustee once heard this ideas that I was talking about, and she said, if my 15-year-old son could hear this idea of bringing the community together and having them work on it, he would lose his stress. So it's not about not talking about it. It's about saying, look, we're getting together and we're doing something about it. And there's a plan. As soon as we know there's a plan, then we lose so much of our fear. And so we need to help them see the plan and see that we're acting on the plan, that we're planning to buy electric next time. We're starting to eat vegetarian. We're retrofitting our homes so that they don't lose heat so much. We're planting trees as much as we can and around us. We're doing all these things that we have a family plan, but there's a plan in the school, and there's a plan in the city, and there's a plan in your place of work, that each of these places has a plan, and your neighbor's doing it too. You're not the only one who's doing it. And then suddenly they feel so much safer because they see it happening around them, and they know it's going to be okay, because we're going to all work together and we're going to fix this. And the interesting thing is, that's what the science is saying to do. It's what the IPCC is saying to do. It's what Mark Carney, this great bank manager, economic system expert, is saying we need to do, is we need to get civic society engaged together on the process. Bringing all these people together, we can handle this. If we just try to leave it to government, we're not going to make it. But if we get everybody on board, it's going to be easy. So
I completely agree. I think that, taking action, feeling like we can make an impact towards positive change is the only way that we won't feel overwhelmed and depressed.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, a lot of these changes have to happen at a policy level, right? So I think about, I grew garlic for the first time this year, and it was magical. But most of the time I buy garlic that comes from China. And I think to myself, how can it be economically sound for me to have to buy my garlic that has to fly, or obviously it doesn't fly, but come around the planet?
Yeah,
that makes no sense to me. Like that has to be a policy thing. Or the other thing that really drives me nuts is the black food containers. You have leftovers or takeout, and how is it we're allowed to use something that can't be recycled in our community? Why can't we just legislate that restaurants have to use, products that can be recycled in their place of business? I don't understand what is the gap there that prevents things like, affordable garlic from Ontario, or, recyclable takeout containers. These seems like very simple requests.
There's no doubt that policy change has to happen. But as I always say, policy changes when you put in place the people in power who know that it's a community issue. So they're going to change policy when the community is all thinking and talking and acting on it. They're going to say, okay, I have to do something about this, because every single person is now angry about they're seeing the links. They're realizing their life is now being affected, and that they're being forced to change, what they're doing. So they're going to be demanding policy change. And yes, you're right. We have to have that policy change. But now when we get the community involved and engaged, they're going to start advocating for it. And when they advocate for it, that's when we're going to see the change coming at the level where it needs to happen. So,
there is a federal election coming, and I don't want to get too political, but what are some of the questions that we should be asking these candidates that are running locally here in Willowdale? What questions do you think would be impactful and important for us to discuss?
Well, the climate crisis is serious. Like, the scientists have told us this. So the federal government's declared it a climate emergency. I think all the party leaders have said that they believe it's happening and it's real. So what are they, not only just are they going to do it, but why are they not, calling us out to begin doing it? Why aren't they telling us what we need to do? Like, there's people eager to make changes, but they don't know what they need to do. So they need to lead us. They need to tell us what to do and begin to get us acting on it, so that we should understand what's happening, and we should know what we need to do. Those two questions, like, I didn't know it was so bad and I don't know what I should do. That's a ridiculous. We're not being led if those questions are what I'm getting. So I would say to them, you need to lead. So the people need to know. And then, of course, they need to begin, mandating the things that the IPCC is calling for. We have to reduce our emissions. Globally, we have to reduce our emissions. Canada is doing terribly in terms of emissions reduction. So I don't keep numbers really well in my head, but what is the way? Because they talk really well. So I think it's not about just getting new numbers and promises. It's like, who is going to be checking and what's going to happen? How are we going to make sure that this doesn't fall through the cracks as it's done all the other times? Because it doesn't look like it's here, but we're reaching the point where we're going to pass points of no return. So, and our leaders know that they need to act on it. So
during COVID, right, we have these regular briefings by our leaders that we kind of, especially, in the first few months, I was tuning into almost every briefing.
Yes.
Trudeau, Ford, Tory, anyone who was briefing us, where are we on the map now? Where are we heading? And I feel like it would be great if there were regular national or like visible leaders were holding regular briefings.
Yes.
Tell us, where are we on the map?
Yeah.
Where are we heading? And what can we do today? Because that's what these briefings were about. They were about, okay, today you need to put a mask on. Today. So like today you should try to buy an electric car. Today, we're having
It drives me crazy because it's free. You stand up there and you say it. You don't have to put money into it. Everybody will go buy an electric car. Yeah. If your leader tells you to do it, it's amazing how many people will do it just because their leader told them they should.
Right. And then you have the added weight of having some policies like that make it beneficial for you to choose these behaviors, right? Yes. So it sounds simple, and I guess the grassroots approach, which you are now, working on, is to, I don't know, I was like, use cooking analogies. You're cooking up the soup, turning up the heat, so that the temperature in the greater community rises, the interest, the value of this discussion, and so that it reaches our leaders. So it's like from the bottom up kind of, bringing change, right?
That's right. Yeah. Can I mention the logo?
Yeah, sure. We could look at it together, Sebastian.
Just the idea of, if this logo began to show up in your car, on your letterhead, in your window of your house, on your door, and it would say to your neighborhood, hey, I'm working on the climate crisis, join me, kind of thing. And then as people start to see it, they begin to feel like they're part of a movement instead of alone. And so that's the idea of the logo. In our school, what we did is, like, classes put the logo on their door with their plan. What is our class going to do? And it became sort of something that we saw all around the school. And they're easy to paint. Like, put a red dot in the middle and paint a green circle, a blue circle, a brown circle, a white circle, and you're done, right? So it just, like, we had kids all painting logos after school and took them home. So, like, we tried to give every kid a logo to take home, but that's the idea, is that these logos would show up in the windows of the houses in Willowdale, and people would know that they and their neighbor, they weren't alone. They were working with their neighbor to target climate change.
That's great. And who designed that?
I did. Oh. The app, the draw app on your phone, with my finger.
I would love to invite you sometime to speak with my other Facebook group called North York Moms, where a lot of, us are parents of younger children. And maybe you could talk to us about, how we can incorporate that logo and making a family plan, because
Yes.
that's actually a
Love
great
it.
idea. I have never thought about it. I think as
Yeah.
parents, we're trying to think, what we can do. And, we have bought an electric car, but we don't think about, like a plan that we all buy into,
Yeah.
and therefore, make choices. I
It's
have
probably the best thing you can do to ease your kids' fears is to have a plan.
the hardest thing for me is that, actually Chinese people, we don't eat that much meat,
Yeah.
but meat and food and all the parts of the animal are integral to our diet. So that's one thing I've been struggling with.
Everybody has a struggling place. So
I know.
we all just do where you've got an electric car, so you're ahead of a lot of us.
Yeah, or eating crickets one day, I think.
Yeah. But start with the 5-year-olds. Like, I took my nieces to Science North, and they hand out crickets to eat and things. And like the 7-year-old and I were like, yeah, maybe okay. And the 5-year-old's like, yum, great. These are fantastic. Can I have some more?
Wow. I
So,
had a deep fried cricket once in Thailand. And I guess the way I would say it is, if you deep fry anything with some spices, it can be palatable, crunchy and, palatable.
mm,
Well, I really, I'm so grateful that you have spent this time with us. And I think, you've clarified to me a very realistic plan of action that is digestible, right?
good.
Because, right, like you're not asking us to, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
even know what that, going green thing looks like. Like,
Yeah.
maybe putting solar panels on our roofs. Like there's so many great things we'd
Yeah.
like to do, but it can seem very unaffordable and out of reach sometimes. But
Yeah.
we could just start with, gathering, sharing ideas,
Yes.
making a family plan, making a community plan,
Yeah.
and, to the extent that we can engage our leaders in this
Yeah.
is to the extent that hopefully there can be meaningful policy change that will, speed up the
Yeah.
bigger gaps that we are encountering.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to close off this interview with just what we call the Willowdale Rapid Fire Round. And, because you've been here in our community for 20 years and you must have your favorite places to go. So the first question is, what is your favorite spot to hang out in Willowdale?
Okay, so across from Cummer Valley is a park, and then beyond the park goes down into a ravine. In that ravine are hemlock trees, and when I was in university, we looked at the pollen found at the bottom of rivers and found out that 500 years ago, this area was covered in hemlock trees, and there's still 2 or 3 old hemlock trees in that part of the ravine. So that is a magical spot for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to take my kids for an exploration.
Mhm.
And what is your favorite place to eat in Willowdale?
Okay, so this is the Korean barbecue restaurant at Cummer and Young, and I used to wait for the bus right in front of it at night when I was so hungry and smell the food, and so I finally got up the courage to go in there and eat, and then I took all my friends in there one by one to eat at it. So I think it's GUI, so I'm sure I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but Gui Gui Korean barbecue.
Oh,
It's really
nice.
good food.
I'll have to try that one out. I think I've never been there.
Mhm,
There are quite a few Korean barbecue places
mhm.
in our neighborhood, and they are all delicious. So, what do you think sets Willowdale apart from other neighborhoods?
This was a hard one for me because I think that each neighborhood has these special things. For me, it's closest to my home, so I find it fascinating. But I probably would find almost any neighborhood I'm in really interesting. So I just like the collection of people and the green spaces, and yeah. So I wasn't
And
able to pull
I
something
guess
out. That,
in us, in Willowdale, you see the potential of us being, the starters of
yeah,
the movement that hopefully can spill out into other areas of the city. So I think you see great potential in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
How do you think Willowdale has changed over the last 20 years? I mean, you've talked about density. What other changes have you seen?
It's interesting because the question I got was change over time. And I teach my kids from a Willowdale book from 200, 300 years ago. And when it was farms here. And so I'm watching the old names of places and the few remaining houses that were here back then disappear. So I'm hoping that we keep some of our history as we build up around. And I'm seeing small houses being torn down into big ones, which isn't the greatest thing because it takes so much energy to heat and cool them. But these are things that I'm noticing changing.
Mm-hmm. I'm really excited, to know that there is a very passionate Willowdale Historical Society.
Yeah.
They really spend a lot of time and effort wanting to preserve archives and to really let the community know that this is a place with a history. And for those of us who are either new to the country or new to Willowdale, to be able to have some way to know the history. I'm in there's a great Facebook group called Willowdale in the 70s where there's thousands of fans of Willowdale who grew up in Willowdale.
Nice.
And often old photos are posted, even photos of Willowdale with horse-drawn carriages.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful just to be able to have a sense of history, a sense of place, right?
Yes.
This was not a metropolis many years ago. And
right.
It just
you can find the remnants. Yeah.
I think that is important that we keep those and preserve them, but not just as physical remnants, but as stories that can be shared. And hopefully that would be also part of what can be done in the community as more, I would like to call it social infrastructure, because in a way that's what you are wanting to build is a social infrastructure that allows more people to be informed and engaged, that would then lead to changes in behavior and action, and also mental health, and adding meaning to people's lives. So
there's a great book written on Willowdale with photos and stories about the people who owned the land around here, like Jacob Cummer and things in there. We're really well done. And I can't remember the author's name, and I think it's Scott somebody, but if you can get a hold of it, if I remember it, I'll send it and try to get it up on the site. We bought 30 copies for the school, and we use them in grade 8 when we look at the history of the area. So
that's great. I think it's so important to know these things. Do you have a hidden gem that you'd be okay to share with us here in Willowdale?
Well, I think those hemlock trees might be my hidden gem. I really would love it. There's no baby hemlocks coming up. They're not going to be there forever. And in my time at Cummer, one fell down in a winter storm. So I think there's still at least one living hemlock tree in that little section of the ravine. So go look at the hemlock tree and say hello to them.
And don't hurt them.
No, don't hurt. It's really big.
What's one thing you'd love to see more of, or something you think Willowdale needs?
I really think they need to recognize the seriousness of the climate crisis and act and advocate on it. And I mean, this is needed in every ward, but this is what I wish, that I could walk down the street and everybody would recognize it and would have a plan and would have the logo and would be acting on it. And I wish that information was out there and people understood it. Yeah, that's what I want to see.
Well, you are taking that action, and I think it is a realistic goal. So I look forward to all the things that are going to happen. So we just have one last question. What is your most memorable moment in Willowdale?
Well, when I'm looking at this, I think it was in March when we had our first Target Climate event, and my class, after all these weeks and months of preparing for this event, did such a fabulous job. And we had watching the counter of people coming tick up to 178 people, and just, online with us, and my kids hosting these breakout rooms on their own. And just, they were so excited afterwards. The energy in my class the next day was incredible. And I think that is probably going to be my most memorable Willowdale moment.
So you're now officially retired. Is this your first school year as a retired teacher.
Yeah.
And I guess this then releases you to spend more time focusing on your greater vision and your greater goals. What are some of the things you hope to see happen in the coming year?
Well, that vision that, Earl Haig, and we want to have 3 running this year. So we're looking at one in November, one in February, one in April. Cummer Valley wants to host one again. I'm also hoping, because my grade 8 split out, and what was really exciting is they're going to their high schools, and that includes in the Catholic District School Board, and they're going to see if they can get events running in their high schools. One of my students went back to Korea, so he's going to try to see if he can get it going in where he is in Korea. One's moved to Richmond Hill, like they're taking the message on. And I think that is really exciting to, then I'm offering to help in all those places and be a part of these events and organizing them and getting them, keeping it simple, but just getting the community into the schools, talking about the climate crisis and other sustainability issues, and bringing these connections and links between people. So that's what I hope happens.
So as, community members, we can look out for these events, and they are not just open to students and parents. Anyone in the neighborhood who wants to know more about what they can do towards targeting climate change can participate.
And we'll be posting them on NeighborLink's site. So, this has been this magical relationship that happens when you bring people together into one space, as we found NeighborLink and they found us. And, that's a wonderful made in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm really excited to see what is going to happen as we join forces in trying to make our community a better place.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your efforts. I'm sure this will not be our last conversation.
Yes.
And we will. And I guess we also wanted to say that on the 28th, we are having a community cleanup day.
Oh, good.
And it's another way that families, I get a lot of parents asking, I want to volunteer. I want to bring my kids to do something, especially parents with younger kids. It's not always easy to find a family-friendly way to serve. So Community Cleanup Day is a great way to wrap up the summer. And we will be posting that on our website, neighborlink.org, if people are interested in serving with us. So yes, what inspiring students. Great job, Ms. Collier. That is from one of our viewers today. So thank you, Esther. Thank you for all you do. And we look forward to seeing Willowdale come together in meaningful ways in the future.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Esther. That was a really inspiring conversation to be able to listen to. I think I'm going to put my head down on my pillow tonight feeling a little bit more calm. So thank you, Esther, for all of that encouragement. And for more information about the work that NeighborLink North York is doing, and again, where you'll be able to find more information too about targeting climate change in the future, you can visit our website, neighborlink.org. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram. I've got the scroller down at the bottom letting you know how you can participate in the community cleanup, whether you want to, get a group of friends together, bring out your family, or join us on your own. That'll be happening across Willowdale this Saturday. cleanupwillowdale.eventbrite.ca. And just another little continuation, an extended Meet Your Neighbor week, as there is a neighbor in our community who will be hosting a neighbor meetup at Conacher Park this Thursday from 5:30 to 8 p.m., hosted by a neighbor named Fariba Arkan. And she wanted me to let everyone know that all neighbors in Willowdale are welcome. It'll be a chance, you can bring something cold to drink, a snack, and meet some neighbors safely this coming Thursday. So we'll see you next time, Willowdale. Same time, same place, new neighbors. Hopefully, you'll beat the heat. And thanks, Esther. Thanks, Lily. Have a wonderful evening.